thanks to the organisers and to all of the other presenters and everyone who's participated. It's been really fascinating. I'm trying to share my screen, but I've just failed, so I'm afraid I'm going to have to talk it through. And I apologise in advance. My window opens out onto a noisy street here in Cali in Colombia, so if you can hear cars going past or people shouting, then I apologise. So as mentioned, I'm going to talk about radical pedagogy and the struggle for social justice in Southwest Colombia. And leading on from Anna Dinestein's mention of the crisis of everything, I would argue that the question of whether humanity is going to be able to rise to the existential challenges which Anna mentioned, which we face in this 21st century, are going to depend to a large degree upon the struggles of social movements around the world. And in particular, again, linking on to the previous presentation from Elaine, I think this is going to depend to a large degree upon the capacity of social movements to overcome political, cultural, racial, and physical borders and boundaries in order to join our struggles and collaborate at local, national, and international level. So I'm going to talk about one case study from here in Colombia of a hopeful example of a social movement pedagogical praxis, which is doing exactly that, trying to bring together very diverse movements up in some of the most challenging circumstances for organising. I'm not going to talk about the context here, but I'm sure most people will know that Colombia remains one of, if not the most dangerous country in the world for activists at the moment. So the pedagogy, this social movement pedagogy that I'm going to talk about is rooted in an understanding of interculturality, which has been forged through praxis. So in this short time, I just want to highlight some aspects of the pedagogical praxis, particularly relating to this intercultural aspect. And intercultural, I guess, links again back to Ellen's talk around convergence. So this idea of social movements coming together. And I want to talk a bit about how it works, just a few of the aspects, and also the learning which emerges from it. So again, I apologize, I'm going to have to skirt over things, but I'm sure we can hopefully have a chance to explain in the questions afterwards if people have questions. So my research centers upon what is a popular education intervention, which has lasted for over 2 decades now, and which has brought together activists from diverse movements and territories in the southwest of Colombia. So it does so in order to empower them to be able to deal with the violent context, but also to reimagine alternatives and to strengthen and interweave their struggles. So it's a process which involves trade unions, indigenous, peasant and black movements, women's collectives, urban shack dwellers, and a whole range of other social movements, some of which have been involved in and played key roles in some of Colombia's most emblematic struggles over recent years and decades. It's a process which has evolved over time and transformed over time. And it initially began at the turn of the century, around sort of the year 2000, as a popular education human rights diploma course, which was run by a small radical human rights organization called Nomadesc. So this diploma was developed as part of a broader strategy, political organizing strategy, which was developed in response to the arrival of paramilitary death squads to the southwest region in 1998, and the violence which that was causing against social movements in particular. And the diploma course was developed with the aim of providing tools for the social movements to be able to face this human rights crisis, but also to try to develop unity and diversity at a moment when there was increasing fragmentation because of this violence. So from 2010 onwards, Nomadesc and the social movements which it works with then transformed this diploma course and created a popular university which is run by and for social movements. This is called la Universidad Intercultural de los Pueblos, the Intercultural University of the Peoples. I'm not going to go much more into the university itself here to focus on the pedagogy, but I'd be happy to discuss afterwards a bit more about this alternative university. So central to the pedagogical praxis that I'm talking about is the creation of an intercultural knowledge dialogue between diverse subjects of struggle. So that's bringing together indigenous activists, trade unionists, shack dwellers, women's collectives, and putting them in a room together in this pedagogical space. And within this knowledge dialogue, the political and cultural diversity of the movements is harnessed as a pedagogical resource. So this diversity, I understand to be the multiple dimensions of participants' humanness, including their collective and individual identities, languages, emotions, struggles, experiences, and collective histories. So through this generative dialogue, this cultural, political, and social divergence between the movements is converted into a tool in order to build intra and inter-movement solidarity, to bring innovation in social movement strategies, and to build ties of trust and emotional bonds, not just between the participants, but between their movements as well, their broader collectives. So the horizontal dialogue, I would argue, is intrinsically decolonial, and that it not only harnesses the ancestral epistemologies of indigenous and Black social movements and peasant movements, but at the same time, it draws upon so-called professional and academic knowledge. So rather than seeking to invert the epistemological hierarchy associated with capitalist modernity, it seeks to collapse it into a horizontal knowledge dialogue. The pedagogical praxis is based on the belief that this intercultural knowledge dialogue between subjects of struggle is the bearer of emancipatory potential. So it's in bringing these different movements together through their diversity, without seeking to collapse them into a homogeneous block, but actually in recognizing that diversity as a source of strength, that actually emancipation can come, and where we can find emancipatory potential. So the learning processes which emerge and which were identified by participants included this sense of a subaltern class consciousness amongst the participants, which came through the increased recognition of the interconnected nature of their struggles and the identification of the common systems of oppression and common identities of their oppressors, but at the same time through the generation of bonds of solidarity and affection. Participants described in particular how this process, how being part of the process generated in them a feeling of belonging to a social movement which extended beyond their own movement or their own territory, and which was made up of very diverse peoples and organizations with very diverse histories and stories. Participants also talked of a deep sense of hope, which was created through their participation in this intercultural interaction. So this dialogical pedagogy, also a key aspect of it is that it builds upon activists' experience and everyday realities in order to develop a structural class-based analysis within this pedagogical space. So the activists who come to the space are already activists, and they already have a deep understanding of the violent modus operandi of the capitalist system in Southwest Colombia. And this has been generated through their concrete, localized, and often embodied experiences of injustice and violence. What the intercultural encounter does then is provide an opportunity for activists to collectively reflect upon each other's experiences, struggles, and praxis. The process draws upon the experience of the different participants in order to illustrate their interconnection and systemic nature. By reflecting upon and engaging with their own and each other's experiences, participants deepen their grasp of the macroeconomic processes and of themes such as imperialism, neoliberalism, which shape the violence that affects their movements. And key here is the fact that this is very much a pedagogy which is rooted in and geared towards social struggle. So it's very much embedded within the struggles of these social movements and has a lot of proximity to these struggles. So it's very closely linked to organizing and mobilizing activities. And the aim is to generate strategic and thematic unity between these different social movements that form part of the process, and develop collaborative strategies, not in order to collapse difference between them and merge into one struggle, but to come together through this strategic and thematic unity. And And finally, I just wanted to finish by saying that it's not a process which emerges from an ideological or political vacuum, but Nomadisk is very much influenced by the ideological and political lineages of the Colombian struggles of Colombian social movements, and specifically by social humanism. So social humanism is an endogenous ideological framework which has been forged as much through praxis as it has through writing, and through the centering of the social subject without losing sight of their location within broader systems of social relations, thus allowing for a bottom-up radical approach, which at the same time retains an anti-imperialist class analysis. And key here is that it doesn't seek to provide prescribe a ready-made revolutionary route map, but rather to build side by side along the lines of the Zapatistas of the road is made by walking. So social humanism is a really interesting framework which emerges from the global south and is little known beyond Colombia, but I think is important in these kind of spaces that we are engaging with these different epistemological frameworks and ideological frameworks. So it actually emerged as part of a result of debates about the suitability of orthodox Marxist approaches within the Colombian context during the 1960s, and is closely linked to liberation theology, and I could go on about that, but I think my time's up now anyway, so I'll leave it there. But thank you very much, and I look forward to further discussion.